Hi guys, this is Ryan, the anomalous ambassador of the airwaves, with a quick message. If you haven't gone over to heroparanormal.com, please check it out. For the price of a boutique cup of coffee a month, you can access all the content behind the paywall for patrons. There's a ton of it. You get the whole enchilada. You can also access that via Patreon. Just search for Hero Paranormal. And if you're listening via YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Although I will not be monetized on YouTube for a variety of reasons, including the truth, if you do that, it would help me a ton. So thank you. The shadow ban is real. Let's go.
Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off.
Blast off on another shadow-filled episode of the Hyper-Anomalous Esoteric Research Organization podcast, also known as Hero Paranormal, broadcasting from Space Wolf Research in the Uinta Basin of Utah. My name is Ryan, the anomalous ambassador of the airwaves, bringing you a banger of an episode today. And today is kind of a special episode for me because one of the first podcasts that really got me to open up about my experiences in the Uinta Basin was the Confessionals podcast. If you haven't checked that out, please do. Things have come full circle. Tony Merkel is the podcast host of the Confessionals, and since then he's grown by leaps and bounds. He has his own media company, Merkel Media. He has an array of great products that he brings, services, not to mention the Confessional podcast continues on. If you haven't gone over to the Confessionals podcast, please check it out. Also check out Merkel Media. Tony has amassed a team of hardcore investigators, researchers, and explorers, not to mention cameramen, you name it. And they go after the data, wherever it may be, whether that be chasing down Bigfoot, dogmen, whatever it is, nothing seems to scare these guys off. So when they asked me about coming out to Space Wolf Research and investigating skinwalker sightings and UAP sightings, I had to warn them, this is a dangerous place. And they were all about it, man. These guys were fearless. They came out. I was unable to be there on site. They roughed it beyond a shadow of a doubt. These guys can withstand any kind of environmental interaction. I mean, they hung out in the most rough and rugged parts of this valley, which is the verdant valley known as Shapeshifter territory, and they investigated. Now, Tony started all this as a passion project. He used to be a truck driver, and it's blossomed. He is a devoted follower of Christ and passionately shaping the future of media through Merkel Media. His vision encompasses realms of filmmaking, podcasting, children's entertainment, all driven by a singular mission, derived from his convictions as a Christian. Now, lucky for the rest of us, they had all the people on board: videographers, sound guys, explorers, investigators, researchers, and they were able to document not only high strangeness in the sky, but also the ground. You can now access this at the new documentary film known as The Shape of Shadows. And while, yes, it was primarily filmed in what I believe to be one of the most active hotspots on the planet, Space Wolf Research, they went out and about and investigated all kinds of stuff here in the Uinta Basin of Utah. Best part is they were able to document it all. And I was no lightweight in telling them the dangers of staying at Space Wolf Research. As many of you know, this property is essentially locked down. I don't just allow anybody to go out there, but these guys were different. They brought a different mindset. They brought a spiritual belief system. They knew the dangers of the dark adept ritual magic in the area. They knew about the no weapons policy on the property. I mean, Space Wolf Research is essentially a paranormal Switzerland. And what I mean by that is all are allowed to thrive on the property. And that includes some of the more dark entities that roam the area. SpaceWolfResearch.com is a neutral property from the perspective of being a sanctuary for all phenomenon. And Tony and his crew still came out, made it happen. These guys are hardcore. And they ran into all kinds of high strangeness. I won't go over it all because there's too much to mention. Besides, it's better if you get it from him. He was there with the team. My conversations with Bureau of Indian Affairs officers gave me one of my favorite sayings. They told me, it's not a matter of if you will see something. It's a matter of when. This area is the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on the planet. An anomalous location which holds many secrets. The precognitive sentient intelligence that roams the area is beyond comprehension, and it scares many researchers off permanently. Many witnesses and experiencers believe that this hitchhiker effect, as it's been coined and termed, of the intelligence can latch onto them and follow them home. Well, there was no better team, in my opinion, to document some of the high strangeness at Space Wolf Research than Tony Merkel and the team at Merkel Media. Let's not wait any longer. Let's bring on one of my favorite guys and one of the best podcasters around. Tony Merkel, welcome to the Hero Paranormal Podcast.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. You have been up to a lot, man. The documentaries that you're doing are off the chain. I had the benefit of having you come out to a property in Utah and investigate, documented it, and that is called The Shape of Shadows. It is, in my opinion, one of the best documentaries that's been done out there, just because you delve into a bunch of areas that the mainstream narrative doesn't really go into. So where should we kick this off? How do we explain to listeners what you guys encountered out there?
Yeah, I guess we should probably start at how it all started, right? And of course you would say it's one of the best because it's your property. So
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I had you on the show. So what happened was, this is years ago now. I think I had you on for episode 202 of the Confessionals podcast, and now we're almost at 600. So it kind of gives perspective of how long it's been. But I was driving tractor trailer still. I wasn't even doing this stuff full time. And I came across a YouTube video where it was Sam Tripoli and you in studio. And the title was something about dogmen or something like that, werewolves. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let me hit play. I didn't know who Sam was. I didn't know who you were. And I listened to you talk about your property, and I was like, I gotta talk to this guy. And I gotta tell you, man, I give you like half credit for my friendship with Sam Tripoli, because that's how I discovered him. I didn't know who he was before that interview with you. And then I reached out to him because on the same interview, he's like, I got to start doing more paranormal stuff. I'm just like, I think I'm your guy. And so I reached out to him, and I was on his show several times. I think it's been like 5 or 6 times now I've been on his show. And you came on my show to talk about your property. And back then, I didn't know what Space Wolf Research was. I barely knew what Skinwalker Ranch was. I didn't know what Skinwalkers were really, because when we started the podcast, one of the it was gaining traction. It was gaining, I guess, popularity and topical conversation was Skinwalker Ranch. But every time I listened to somebody talk about Skinwalker Ranch or Skinwalkers, like, it was always in code. I I would listen to people's interviews and stuff, and I always got like different answers as to what a skinwalker was. And then like there was the native perspective, which was like silent. Like there's people that just we don't even say that word. And I'm just like, well, how am I supposed to know what this thing is if y'all don't even talk about it? And that was my introduction to really the Space Wolf research and stuff, which was you talking about it on Sam's show, and you come on my show and you tell your story about how you got involved in it. And the thing that I always tell people, and I just thought it was so funny, and I'll never forget it, during the interview. Now, I was not in a position to do any kind of documentaries, traveling. Like I was a full-time truck driver, 12, 14-hour days, barely. I think I had like 2 weeks of vacation a year. And so like it wasn't even in the cards when I asked you this question. But I said to you on the show, I said, if I came out to check out the property, or can people come check the property? I forget how I said it, but you said, no, we don't bring anybody on the property. It's very exclusive, and this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, okay, you know. And then right after the interview, you're like, dude, you're totally coming. I'm like, oh, sweet. And that laid the groundwork. And years later, we decided to actually pursue it for our second film. So our first, but we've shot. We're shooting our fourth documentary in October of 2023, and we've shot. So as of that one, we'll have 4 documentaries shot, and we also shot our first feature film movie this past summer. That's going to be called The Sasquatchologist. We shot it out in Colorado. So we've been shooting a lot of different things, but the first one was the Expedition Dogman, where we went to Kentucky hunting the Dogman, based off of a story that we heard on the show. And when we were thinking about where do we want to do another one, because Expedition Dogman was a very, very big success, especially for guys who really didn't have a plan going into it. It was my fault, but I just was like, I rounded up 3 other guys, and I'm just like, you guys want to go hunt a monster in the woods for a week? And they're like, sure. And, Ward was a fantastic cameraman the whole time. I mean, he comes from a very professional industry. I mean, he's been a videographer for some really high-profile people. And here he is running around the woods hunting a monster with me for a week. And there was no plan whatsoever. I think I spent like $5,000 getting everybody there, getting the cabin and all that stuff. And that film went on YouTube, and we put it on YouTube because we didn't have any game plan. And the first like month or two, it had like 200,000 views or something like that. And then Joseph Granda, who then came alongside of me early in the process, he's like, how many views do you have on YouTube? And I was like, almost 200,000. He's like, how long is it up there? And I tell him, he's like, yeah, you need to take it off there now. He's like, if it's getting that kind of attention, you should, try to at least recoup what you invested in it. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't making any money off YouTube. And so that was like the kind of janky process that we started the film stuff with. But Joseph, coming from the industry, he's 30 years experience in Hollywood. He's been on Broadway. Like, he really knows the industry well, and he's helped a ton with Merkel Media Films. And so we were game planning, where do we go for the next one? And when we were talking about different ideas, we came across the idea of Skinwalker Ranch because it's such a hot topic and all this stuff. And then I was like, guys, I actually know a guy who owns a property that butts up against that. Really? I was like, yeah, I don't know why I never thought about this before. And I reached out to you and got the ball rolling, and the ship was set off into the ocean of going across the country to Space Wolf Research, where we spent a week out there hunting legends and lore.
Man, and you guys, in the introduction, I kind of went about explaining to listeners how you guys really roughed it. You got no special treatment, but I'm glad that you kind of did that intro of how the airwaves, kind of the magic and synchronicities of how we connected, because as Joe Rogan says, Sam Tripoli really is the tip of the spear. He's a great guy, a great friend, great individual, and it's really strange how this all culminated. But you guys went out to Space Wolf Research and truly were roughing it. Like, you got zero help really, other than some, Native American friends that I had in the area, etc. And I was amazed at, what you brought to the screen. As far as your documentaries, Expedition Dogman was amazing. I'm part and partial to The Shape of Shadows. I think it's equally good, and I'm super excited for The Sasquologist. It's great stuff you have going on over there, and Merkel Media is really growing in ways that I don't think anybody ever expected, and it's due to all your hard work. And that was really evident to me when you went out to this really rugged, really treacherous. I kind of gave you the warning of like, this place is there's darkness, there's danger, there's a no weapons policy, which you guys are very apt and adepts with firearms. And I kind of said, as much as I would like to, we kind of have a no weapons policy due to some sanctuary issues of some of the entities in the area, and you guys were cool with all of that. Okay, so I was amazed. You guys touched down and immediately just kind of delved into it. I believe you had a couple of your other team members show up first, and how did that go down?
Yeah, so the guy. First of all, I gotta say, man, just on your show, thanks for having us out there. It was a wild experience. And when we go out to these films, our goal is this. So with my show, I host conversation with people about their paranormal experiences, anything from, your typical hauntings to abductions, Bigfoot, dogmen. We go all over, and I don't care what your experience is or how weird it is. Like a lot of times people will say to me, like, this is really weird. And I'm like, try me, And so, like, that's where this all stems from. We go out there, and our goal is to basically replicate what I do with my show, which is allowing people to share their experiences, not going in trying to manipulate a story to what we want it to be, but just let the story unfold, and it is what it is. Now, as filmmakers, that can be challenging because what if you invest all this money and nothing happens, right? And so that's why we just kind of we're trying to condition the audience that, listen, like, we're documenting the journey. Like, we're not promising you, Dogman on film. We're not promising you jumping through portals, even though we totally want to. The idea is to document the journey, putting ourselves in the environment of known locations that have wild experiences and see what happens around us. So my guys go out there, and Joseph and Christian show up a day early. And Joseph's the producer on the film, so a good producer shows up at least a day early to make sure things are good, talk to the locals, see who is willing to talk, who's not willing to talk, all that stuff. So we don't waste time, knocking on doors that shouldn't be knocked on. And they set up camp. Now, first, I'll tell you, like, you were right. I mean, you said that the area is rough, and I was like, all right, man. And, it was rough. Like, it was rough. I mean, even the temperature and the weather was weird, man. Like, I don't know if it's normal out there, but like we would go from 90 degrees to snow in like a 24-hour period. And I was like, how is this possible? It was very weird. If that's not supernatural, I don't know what is. But the guys, they start setting up the camp and the truck, and Joseph sets up a tripod with binoculars. And the idea is just to look over the mesa, just look in the area, just see what we can see. And Christian, at that time, decides to take his iPhone, hit record on the video, and put it up to binoculars just to kind of see if he can get some, video footage through the binoculars. And just as he does that, you would think it's staged. It's not. I don't have that kind of budget to stage something like this. But just as he puts it up to the binoculars, there's this large white object. I mean, when you look at it compared to trees and stuff, it's about the size of a tree that it flies behind. It's not tiny. And it shoots across the frame horizontally, like on a straight line. And you catch it on film. It's white. It's fast. It shoots across. We have it. It was broad daylight. And what's interesting is Joseph said he saw it not from the video, but in live right there. He saw this thing drop down from the sky in a vertical line, shoot horizontally across where we caught it on video, and then shoot straight up again. And so what is that? I have no idea, but it was definitely like a welcome to the area for us. And Joseph called, and he had spent time talking to some locals and finding out about the giant legends there and all this other stuff. And he called us on the way we were probably somewhere in the middle of the country, like Nebraska or something like that. And he calls us and tells us what happened. And at that point, we couldn't get there fast enough. I was ready to be there and go. And, you mentioned about the no guns thing. I got to tell you, man, I was nervous about doing that. I really was. But it just was one of those things where, okay, we're just going to trust it all works out because, man, like, we went to Kentucky hunting the dog man, right? And we had guns. Like, everybody had a gun on them. And we're going through the woods doing that. Well, we're going to a location where not only are dog men seen, but everything else is seen. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I hope part of me was like, I hope we don't have anything happen because I was like, I just don't feel safe. But yeah, we had that on before I even got there. And once I got there, things just kind of evolved, I guess, as we explored the property more. And it was kind of wild. We had we got there, we kind of set up base camp more, and we just started walking around exploring. And man, we found a trackway not far from the camp, not far from where the container was lifted and moved. And by the way, for the audience to know, I don't know if we depicted this very much in the film, but the whole week we set up our camp, like our tent right next to the container. Like the wall was right there next to our camp, next to our tents. We're like, well, let's sleep here and see what happens. Kind of hoping that all of a sudden we find ourselves being sucked into another realm and have a really good film for people when we got back in like 1,000 years. But didn't happen. But we started walking around and we found a trackway that was very odd. And what was interesting is when we discussed this trackway with the two natives that were kind of showing us around the area, both of them, we showed it to them both separately because we wanted their own opinion separate from the other. And they both were very cautious, concerned, and believed that what we stumbled on was a shapeshifter, skinwalker, trackway in mid-transformation. Because what it was, you see a footprint in the mud, and you see it turn and start walking down a hill, and then all of a sudden the footprints are gone, and what is in its place is horse. It's like horse hooves, just mid-transformation. And I tried thinking my way out of it. I was like, all right, so what's the logical thing here? Because surely this can't be a skinwalker, and I'm not that lucky. Well, I can't think of anything other than what we're out there hunting, because if it was, because my most logical explanation was maybe this was somebody that had a horse and they started going down that hill and they hopped up on the horse, and that's why their footprint disappears. The problem with that is there were no horse footprints where the human footprints were. Like, so if I'm seeing human footprints, surely there's going to be horse footprints as well because it's much heavier. And there was none. It just went, it was like human footprints, they're gone, and all of a sudden now we got horse footprints. And that kind of walked through this opening in the field. And that was like, what the heck did we find here? And I think Joel was the first one to find it. I know I wasn't the first one to find it. Usually that's typical for me, except for when we found the ritual circle. But I don't know if you want to, I don't want to jump too far ahead if you want to say something, or if I should just keep on rattling off the experience.
No, you guys, man, yeah, no, that's great. And you guys really did find a lot fairly quickly, faster than I would have expected. And it's kind of getting back to what you said about budgets. This place, oftentimes people will think it's something and they'll go out there and be like, oh, wow, this is the base camp. And it's like, really, I recently took a big time CPA from Vegas out there, and from a budget perspective, he said, after he saw what he saw at night, he's like, you would have had to spend millions to like make what I just saw happen. And when you go out to the property, it is not super high tech. I mean, there's a few DAP cams, a few game cams, some other devices around, but it is not wild and crazy. And your timing of how quickly you guys, kind of got a bead on it, right? You got a bead on what was taking place. You followed the energy, you found the tracks, you saw stuff in the sky. And interestingly, I was really worried because some an aerospace exec and a smaller umbrella corp had literally backed out of some experiments like right before you guys arrived. So the timing was perfect, and I was really worried. But you guys did encounter some interesting developments while you were there that were more kind of a human scenario. And I want to touch base on those before we get into like the really dark stuff, which you brought up, some of the circles and stuff. But you guys ran into, I guess, I don't know what to call it. You kind of had a bit of a chase, and then you also ran into someone that was, I want to say maybe, I don't know how to refer to them, maybe a DOD person. How do we touch base on that and then delve into the deeper like ritual circles and actual entities?
Yeah, so I don't know how to describe what happened that night. That was towards the end of the week, and people knew we were there. I'll say that much. We were asking around. We weren't being shy about things. I mean, we went down to a coffee shop down in town, and I think every morning we were there. And we asked the first morning the people working there if they had heard anything. They know of Skinwalker Ranch, and we're here filming. Like, we weren't shy about it. Maybe we should have been a little bit more, I don't know, cautious, or I don't know. But we were hoping for our last night to be something where it was just like, okay, it's like if anything's going to go crazy, it's got to happen tonight because we're leaving. And that kind of got shot out of the water when the human element came into play. I was driving back with the guys in my 4Runner, and it was dark out. It was late at night. I don't know how late, but it was late enough that it was dark. And I didn't know what was happening, but when I pulled into the gate on your property, I pulled past the caretaker's house. And then Joel just says to me, shortly past the caretaker's house, he said, "Hey, Tony, can you stop for a second?" And so I'm like, yeah. So I stopped, and he didn't say anything. He just got out of the car, opened it up, stood next to the doorway, and turned around and faced the road, just standing there. And I'm like, what the heck? Is he about to pee? Like, what? Like, I don't know what he's doing. And he gets back in the car. I'm like, you good? And he's like, yeah, there was a car following us, and then they just stopped at the gate. When I got out, they took off. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, man, our wives are halfway across the country. Let's go on a little chase. And and I'm not even thinking. That thought process didn't even go through my head, to be honest with you. I wasn't even thinking. I was just like, let's go. Let's freaking go. And so I spun the 4Runner around, and I got 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 5 guys in the 4Runner weighing it down, and the 4Runner just I've since got rid of it because of this trip. I'm not even kidding you. I've gotten rid of it because I'm like, I need if I'm gonna be running around with a bunch of people in my vehicle, I need to have something that has like a turbo on it or something that really can kind of kick it up into notch, because I had a hard time getting that thing moving. And we started going down the road trying to catch up to this truck or car, whatever it was. And we're not making ground, and we're going like 70. I think one of the guys said that they thought I was going like 90. I really don't know. I really wasn't looking. I was just trying to push it as fast as I could with my comfort level, not knowing these roads. You know the area out there, a lot of the dirt roads, and if you don't know the roads, it's not like they're marked with like guardrails and stuff. I mean, you could do some damage to a vehicle, let alone maybe wreck it. Mm-hmm. And so I was just flying down the road trying to keep up with this vehicle, and I could not make up any ground on him. Like, he was going. Like, it was like he was running from something, and just as we're going and doing this, at least one, but I think it was 2 vehicles came out from somewhere behind us. And now, granted, I know I was going at least 70 on certain stretches, and these vehicles are just keeping right up with me, tailing me. And we're like, oh, crap. So it felt like we were being surrounded, And we get to a major road where this dirt road comes out. The truck, or I think it was a truck now. The reason why I say truck is because I think it was like a straightaway, and when we were coming up on the major road. You could see it off in the distance, and that vehicle was up at like the T intersection, and they made a right-hand turn, if I remember correctly, and you could see it was a truck. I think that's why I say truck. Anyways, we get up there, and we come to a stop, and I think one of the vehicles bailed at this point, and they weren't behind us, so it was just one. But when we're sitting at the stop sign, we're just kind of like, what just happened? You know, what do we do? And this vehicle came up behind us that was chasing us. So they came up, and they go around us. And if I remember correctly, it was hard to see, but I'm pretty sure it was either like a four-wheeler or a side-by-side or something like that. It might have been a side-by-side, but it was not like a regular vehicle. And so they could have been just sitting off the side of the road waiting, you know. But what's really kind of eerie about the whole situation is we find out on the way back, Joseph's texting us, and he's like, where are you guys at? And we tell him, and he's like, I just had somebody come into camp. And we're like, what? And so we get back as fast as possible. And Joseph says that he saw us come in and stop and turn around and leave. And so Joseph, he's a real laid-back guy. He's like, well, I don't know what they're doing, but, you know, Joseph's older than us. I mean, I'm not saying he's an old man. I think he's like in his early or mid-50s. And, you know, I'm 37. Joel is like in his early 40s, and everybody else is either my age or younger. And so Joseph's probably just like, these young guys are just doing whatever, going crazy, whatever. You know, he's the producer, you know, and this is our first documentary together. This is our first time working together. So, like, he's just laid back, and he's like, well, let these young guys do whatever they want to do, you know. I'm just here documenting, you know, so we have a storyline for the production. And so he wasn't concerned. Well, when we left, he said a little bit later, another vehicle comes down the road, turns into the gate, goes by the caretaker's house, and he knew it wasn't ours because there's that light up at the front. You could see the vehicle and what it was. He knew it wasn't us. I think he said it might have been a sedan. And they drove by your caretaker's house and continued to come down towards our camp. And when he sees this, he's like, oh, shoot. And so he takes his bright flashlight that has like a strobing feature, and he turns on the strobing feature and he shines it at them, and they stop immediately. They turn around and they get out of there. And so what's hard about this is I don't know how somebody could plan to follow us to the location, stop at the gate, and know that we're going to stop, see them, and then turn around and chase them. Because that's kind of what you would think would need to happen in order for the other car to come in then after us, thinking that it's all clear. Because I think they were thinking that everybody's in the vehicle because they saw us. They knew there was a bunch of guys in the vehicle, not accounting for Joseph back at camp. And the only thing I can think of around that is when that vehicle stopped at the gate and we turn around and we chase after, that they called somebody and like, they're chasing after me, go to the camp and whatever. And obviously that didn't work out because of Joseph. But that was our last night there, and it just kind of threw I mean, it was exciting, but it kind of just killed the vibe. I mean, we were really looking forward to kind of spending the whole night stargazing and just looking up in the sky and just kind of relaxing and just taking it all in the last night. And then that didn't happen. The last night was like us just sitting there, not looking up, but looking down around, wondering if somebody's going to come in through the bushes, because we had thought we saw somebody running down the hill from, you know how like when you go by the caretaker's house and you're going down that kind of, I don't want to call it driveway, but the path that's been laid out up to the shed. Well, there's that whole other side of the property that kind of goes downhill. Well, it looked like I forget who it was, but somebody thought they saw somebody running from towards the top of the hill down into those trees towards the bottom of the hill. And so we were on edge that night, and we weren't even thinking about what was in the sky. We were trying to make sure nobody came into camp, and it killed our vibe, man. It killed our vibe. But I mean, it's what happened, and we just documented the experience. And so that's kind of what like I said, what we're trying to do. We're trying to just be in the environments and see what happens, and we cross our fingers hoping that we can have, the golden ticket without losing our lives. Like I would love to catch like Dog Man on film, 10 feet away from me. It knows I'm there, but just has a change of heart and walks away, and I just catch it all on film. Like that's I would love it. But that last night, man, none of that was even on our mind, man. We were just worried about the human element of it, and yeah, that was the human encounter that we had. It was very interesting.
And, as lame as it killed the vibe, that is a very real aspect of like the whole deal is this very, I don't know what to call it. It seems as if, I don't know, when you're in the area, synchronicity and coincidence, you quit believing in, right? And after you told me about this, I very much believe that there seemed to have been a collaborated effort or surveillance pattern upon you guys. And this is kind of the strange but disconcerting real kind of government or shadow government vibe, which often sabotages research, investigations. And, go figure, it is, in fact, one of the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspots on the planet, if not the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on the planet. So there is kind of a shadow government vibe out there. And man, the roads are not friendly out there. So I'm glad you guys weren't actually filming during this chase, because they are deadly roads. A lot of people do in fact die on them. And, one day, this is a little bit kind of going out on a tangent. I was sitting out in front of the caretaker's quarters, and trust me, I go through caretakers like nobody's business. You can probably assume why. But there was like this box truck that was coming down that road doing probably 75 miles an hour, and a very heavy, like a plumbing or an HVAC type box truck. This guy was scared to death, as we looked at him through the windshield, almost went off the road 3 or 4 times in front of the property and went down around the bend and finally did go off the road. He believed that he was being chased by something. And, another, and I've got to get into this because there is a real aspect that is, not government, not DOD, not the human aspect. There is a very unique synchronicity, which is the spiritual aspect of this. And you and I amazingly agree on this. But let's get into that and the Dark Adept ritual magic circles and events that you talk to neighbors, property owners, etc. about.
Yeah. So, that's the situation that we stumbled upon. And, looking back on it, I wonder if finding what we found that night kind of kicked off all the activity in the sky, because it happened almost immediately. But Ward and I were up at the base camp with everybody else, and I think I had just remembered, I'm like, oh, I got these game trail cams. And so I wanted to hang them up. I was like, well, ideally I would like to hang it up during the day, but that's not an option, and we don't want to waste a night here without these things up. And turns out we didn't catch any. Well, actually, we did catch a flashing light on Game Trail Cam down there, but that didn't even make the film. So, but what I'll say is this: so we go down off trail, and we find a tree that we thought would look like a good spot to hang a Game Trail Cam up, kind of overlooking the trail, but in the direction of where we saw the tracks that transformed. So we're thinking, if this is a skinwalker, maybe it kind of walks this path often. And I get down there, and I'm looking at the tree, and I'm about to start climbing up the tree a little bit to hang this thing at a good height. And Ward's with me, and Ward, he's the cameraman. He doesn't have his camera, but he's also like security, like we're all security minded, but Ward's got training, and he's the responsible one of all of us. Like I would say probably the most irresponsible one, if you want to rank it that way, would be Joel. And I say that because Joel he's almost suicidal. Like he's like, I don't care, I just want to see it. And so like if he thinks he sees a skinwalker going to a bush, he's like, all right guys, I'll see you, and he goes. Me, I'm kind of like that, but then at the moment, at a little bit of a moment, I'm just like, man, I still got my 5-year-old and 3-year-old at home. And, like I'm like, all right, Joel, hopefully you do well, buddy. Let me know what you see, And so it's like kind of me and Joel, 1A and 1B, and Ward is like Z, like on that scale. Like he's like, nope, we're going to be responsible about this. We're going to be security minded. We're going to think this through. And so I just assume he's got my back, like he's going to be standing there right behind me, if not looking at me with his back towards me, so he's looking when I'm not, And I kind of look over my shoulder and he's not there, and I turn around and I look, and he's probably about 20, 30 feet away from me with I think it was his hands in his pockets or his hoodie, his back towards me, and his head down looking at the ground. And I'm like, what the heck is this guy doing? And so I kind of look closer, and you can see because it's the moonlight. I think it was the moonlight. I could see, and I could see a skull, like a cow skull or something. And that's all I saw. And I was like, oh, is that what I think it is? And he's like, yep. And that's all he said. And so I'm thinking, oh, cool, And so I quickly scurry up the tree, and I hang that game trail cam, and I hop down, and I bouncingly walk over to Ward, to look at this cow skull, and like, oh, cool, maybe we'll take this to the camp or something, just say, hey guys, look what we found. It wasn't a cow skull. It was many bones laid out in a circle. If I remember correctly, I don't have the pictures in front of me, but I believe there was a bowl in the center of it with like tobacco and even like some coins. It was a ritual circle, and there was, and I mean, I'm not a real expert in that stuff, so I didn't know exactly what I was looking at other than, okay, somebody is doing some funky stuff here, and is this like a skinwalker deal, or is this somebody else trying to conjure skinwalkers? What is this, And is Ryan setting me up right now? Like I was like, what is going on? And so we took pictures, and thankfully, in the last 5 years or so, these cell phones have gotten really good at taking low light pictures, So we were able to get some really good pictures the night of discovery that you could see very good detail. And we take the hike back up to base camp. We get up there, and we start telling the guys. I basically walk in the circle like, all right, everybody shut up. I was like, I got a story to tell. Story time with Tony. And I sat down around the fire, and I start telling the story I just told you. And then I pull out the picture, and I start passing around the circle. By now, you actually see this portion on film because Ward grabbed his camera and started filming as I'm talking. And we're passing around the picture, and the guys are reacting to it. Everybody was just like, what the heck? Even Beau was there. And I don't know if you've ever met Beau. He contacted me for my show. And when I interviewed him, it was like a month before I was going out to your property. And I was like, Beau, your interview couldn't be more timely. And so I invited him to be part of the project. And so he was there sitting around the campfire. Johnny was not. And Beau was freaked out by it immensely. And Joseph didn't want to even really touch the phone. He was just like, this is weird. And just as that happened, I think Christian, he saw lights. Oh, yeah, he saw a big, spotlight shoot up into the sky from across the valley. I guess it's the mesa over there. And what's interesting about this light that shot up in the sky is it was very, very large. So, when I say spotlight, I don't have a better word for it. It wasn't a spotlight. When you think spotlight and you're thinking large spotlight, you're thinking when you're driving down the highway and you see that one, and they used to do it back in the day, the light shining in the sky, and you're like, what is going on over there? You almost want to follow the light to find out who has the sail kind of thing, And it wasn't like that. It was very wide, and it wasn't shooting up into like miles into the sky. It was just making the whole area kind of almost glow up in the sky right above it. And so I don't know what it was, but I estimate this thing had to be at least a couple 100 feet wide, whatever was doing the illumination, at least a couple 100 feet wide. Because where we saw it, there's no way it was just a small, little light. It was not a flashlight. This was very large, and that's on the film as well, because Ward's camera was not able to catch it. It was too far away for his camera. But again, the low light picture taking we were able to do, we were actually able to snap a picture of it to be able to show people what we were seeing, and it accurately depicted what we were seeing. And what I found interesting about that was just a few months ago, I saw the same phenomenon on the TV show, and I was like, "Holy crap! They have the same thing." And now I'm thinking, like, did they capture that the same night we captured it, or is this something that happens often enough that they caught a different night? But when we saw that, we're like, "Oh crap!" We're looking at that, and that's when the sky started lighting up. There was probably UFOs for a good 2 hours, like seemingly all over the place. Like, we're looking over towards the ranch, and then like we're seeing a bunch of stuff over in that direction. But then there was happening right above us, around, behind us. It was just like the sky was just popping off for a couple hours, and then just all within a few minutes just settled down and just calmed down and relaxed. But part of me feels like we finding that circle kicked things off, and maybe it's just coincidental timing and stuff, but I just find it very odd that, nothing was happening that night. Like, when we went down, if the sky was lighting up, I wouldn't have gone down there to hang game trail cams. The fact is, there was nothing happening. It was just quite boring, and we were just sitting around the fire doing nothing. And so we were like, okay, let's go hang some cameras. We find the ritual circle. Within 15 minutes from then, the sky's popping off after that light shoots up in the sky on the other side. And I'm just thinking to myself, it seemed like there was a series of events here. It seems like it was finding a ritual circle, the moment of discovery amongst the group talking about it, then that light shoots up in the sky, and then the sky starts lighting up with all this stuff. And I don't know if it's all related. I don't know if that light that shot up in the sky triggered the UFO lights, but it was one thing after another that night. And we were like, holy crap. And I think that might have been my first night there, if I remember correctly. And we're like, oh man, this week's gonna be bonkers. I'm gonna bag a dog, man. and then those guys had to, ruin my night the last night there. But yeah, that night was wild. I mean, and I don't know what to make of it, other than when we took Beau and Johnny, we took them to that location separately as well. So the footprints we took separately, them both separately there, and also took them to the ritual circle. If I remember correctly, Beau, he was weirded out, but he was willing to look at it and explore it. Johnny, he didn't want to be anywhere near that thing, and he was emphatic. He was like, "Yeah, that's the Skinwalker ritual circle. Yeah," and he was just like, "It's not. This isn't good." Like, and it just seeing his reaction really set the tone for us. We're like, okay, this is actually something, because we don't know. I mean, I'm from Tennessee. I don't know anything about Utah, but for somebody that lives there, showing us around that week, is very aware of what's going on. For him to be weirded out by it, and he's not like, oh yeah, it was my nephew who's over here playing with bones that he found out in the field. It wasn't like that. He was very concerned. That kind of put a spin on it. It was like, okay, so now we're dealing with something that, what is this, black magic? What is this? And you start hearing about the ways that skinwalkers supposedly, become skinwalkers, with the sacrifices of, loved ones or somebody really close to them. And it's not like close as in like, oh, my neighbor, we used to be friends, but, he kind of ticked me off last Christmas. Let me sacrifice him. No, it's got to be, a parent, a relative, God forbid, a kid. Like, it's dark. Like, you have to be willing to kind of cross over into the point of no return with this stuff. And when we had that confirmation that that's what we're dealing with, it was like, okay, it's getting real now. It's getting real now. And you know, I don't think anybody had any hitchhiker effect from that week. At least I didn't. But I do hear that is something that happens to people when they're in this area, that it kind of follows them home. In fact, you and I talked about that on my show, I believe.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'm really glad that you bring up the darkness of the ritualistic magic, because a lot of people don't realize how dark it is. It's literally like your soul is not enough. Like you need to delve so deeply and into this dark, you know, a lot of anthropologists, social theorists, people like Clyde Kluckhohn and others have delved into, you know, the definitions and the discoveries of how deep some of this dark adept magic is. And it's like you said, it's like just when you think you're at the bottom of the barrel, it goes deeper and darker. And nighttime, I mean, speaking of the dark, it's a whole different vibration of the location. Everything changes, am I right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not the same place at night as it is in the day. And, you know, as far that kind of the issue I have with it, it seems like it comes in waves. When the high strangeness comes, people often ask, like, okay, so, you know, what's the rhyme or reason? And it's sort of like if you're a surfer and you start getting big waves coming in on the ocean, it's like that. Like you can sense it, like it starts coming in waves, and then it leaves the same way. And, you know, it's so funny that I'm thinking of like you guys being out there with no firearms, and it's the reason I have the no firearm policy out there is there's this thing that the Pentagon described as bidirectional mimicry, which is that these entities can kind of heighten people's fear scenarios to extreme levels, almost without reason sometime. And what I mean by that is I've come across a property at times when it appeared like a shootout at the OK Corral. And I'm not even kidding. It's like mind blowing. I came to the I've had caretakers shoot at werewolf entities multiple times. I've had one caretaker in particular be so scared inside that he was shooting at a skinwalker dogman entity outside of that caretaker's quarters, and he shot right through the walls. He was so scared. And then I came to the property one time early in the morning, like 5 a.m., you know, like I'm barely having my first cup of coffee. And I have a contractor who has jumped off of the vehicle that he was driving, off the roof of the vehicle onto the roof of the caretaker's quarters. And he had his gun drawn and he was shooting towards the back of the property because he was so scared. He was shooting towards something back there. And I'm like, whoa, man, what's going on? And it's just one of these weird things that sometimes things can really pop off quick. And I'm glad you mentioned Beau and Johnny, because those guys were great. I think you did a great job of really, you know, delving into what they thought some of this stuff was, because they have close and familial and intrinsic ties to the area and a history. And Johnny is like super spiritual, as you know. He's actually been in the Fatima region, which, you know, seems like forever since you guys did this in Portugal. I mean, really spiritual guy. And so when Johnny said in the documentary, when I was watching, and when Johnny was like, oh, no, that's bad juju, like, I'm glad that you guys were like, oh, okay. Like, you have to kind of take that to heart. What were your opinions of some of the stories that Beau and Johnny told you guys?
Well, as somebody who listens to other people's stories for a living, I wasn't caught off guard by anything. I over the years, you just learn to take things as they tell it. You know, when I interview people on my show, I don't go into an interview expecting to agree with everything said. I go into an interview understanding that this is an individual person who's going through experiences, and they're gonna tell those experiences through their worldview lenses. So I always use this example where if somebody is an atheist and a priest, so not one person, but two people, an atheist and a priest, and they walk into a room and they have a paranormal experience, they're going to walk out of that room describing the experience very, very differently, because one has a very theistic worldview, probably supernatural worldview, and the other one says none of this exists. So the way they describe it is going to be differently, and that's the same thing when it comes to people telling their stories and stuff. Everybody has their own life experiences, what has shaped and molded them up to that point to allow them to share their experience through their vantage point. And not only that, but also, then you have the people who, you're not going to agree with on maybe theological standpoints. Like I've had witches and Satanists on the show. I mean, right off the jump, I'm not going to agree with them on a whole lot because, I'm very outspoken about my Christian faith. And so we're already opposite, but we have good conversations most of the time. And with Johnny and Beau, I had interviewed Beau beforehand, and Beau's interesting. He's a young man. He's in his mid-20s, and he has lived a life of fighting the supernatural realm on a level that people cannot comprehend. They just can't. And I knew this going out there, and so I think, given the fact that you have these two different Native American people, even that though, it's the common ground, but it's not going to be glue that keeps them the same. They're two individual people, and Beau and his experiences before we got out there. I mean, Beau is I can't remember the name of the area, but Beau was in some area I can't remember, and he was by himself, and then he heard these people running from something. And when these people come blowing by him and running, he hears what sounds like almost like an evil laughter, hyena sound, but not. And then these creatures come busting out of the bushes, and he runs. And these people, they all, like, he runs with these people. They get in this truck, and he kind of hops in the back of the truck. They take off, and he leaves all his stuff there, and they bring him back later to get his stuff. But like, that was like a start for him, where from there on he was tapping into a supernatural realm that he never expected. It's almost like it chose him. And so I had that coming in to that area in my back of my head. And then Johnny taking us around, talking to us about water babies and just the history of the area and stuff. You really get a sense that the people of this area, they're all too familiar with the supernatural realm. They're all too familiar with what happens here, to the point that I almost feel like it probably is. It seems like it's just second nature for them. It's not something that is like something they dwell on, because it's just something that they exist in. And that's what makes the area so interesting, because with what happened to that ranch that kind of brought the whole world's eyes to it, Johnny was saying that stuff happened for decades before the Shermans bought the ranch. Mm-hmm. It's just they bought the ranch and they weren't expecting it. And so they talked about it where the others didn't. And they made a big thing about it, and that's how it kind of became known as this place, a specific place that has all this activity. And it does, but it's not just the ranch. It's the whole area. And I got that vibe from Johnny, where it's just like, this is what we deal with on the regular. It's not, we don't take it lightly. We don't think you should mess with it, but it's not something that we're shocked by either. And I think that's kind of what I took away from that whole thing, is like the Native perspective is, yeah, this is real, and we've been dealing with this far longer than you were even aware of it. We've been dealing with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And, the name that you chose for your doc is so on point. Naming the documentary The Shape of Shadows, you really nailed it, in my opinion. because it's darkness and high strangeness that I find very dimensional in nature, right? Like it can manifest itself in various ways. And as we kind of start to wrap things up, let's tell listeners where they can buy your gear, like t-shirts, which you have, your logo on and the shape of shadows, and more importantly, where they can download and watch the doc and keep in touch with all you have popping before I get into other questions, because I don't want to skirt over that.
Yeah, so I'm really bad with merch, and so you can buy my merch nowhere because I don't have to list it anywhere. I have some bins here at my house that I gotta sell this weekend when I'm speaking at an engagement, and then after that, I'm gonna really try to I'm going to re-up on my merch, and I'm really going to actually try to get some things listed on my stores. I have two main websites. I got a lot of websites that people don't even know about. My two main websites is theconfessionalspodcast.com. That's how all this started. And also Merkel.media. There's no .com on that. It's just Merkel.media. And those both have stores that are unlisted right now because they're empty, but probably within the next couple months, I'm going to start really focusing in on listing merch there with different logos and designs. But what I really want to point people towards is Merkel.media. There's plenty of buttons on the front page for you to click to stream, and you can watch The Shape of Shadows and Expedition Dogman from the website. When you click the button to rent or buy, it will redirect you to our Vimeo on-demand page. You can purchase right there, watch it, stream it to your TV, all that good stuff. And the reason why we're doing it this way is because I don't think people totally understand how much these big companies reach into your hard work and take money that I don't think they've earned, especially since I've spent years building an audience. I feel like, I don't really want Amazon taking 50% right off the top, So we decided to do on-demand streaming through Vimeo. That way people are coming directly to us for the product. And eventually it'll be on Amazon. Like Expedition Dogman is on Amazon, Tubi, Apple TV, and eventually it'll be on all those platforms for The Shape of Shadows. But right now, the only way you're going to get it is if you go to Merkel.media and hit Stream Now buttons, and you'll be able to get it through there. And I promise people, this adventure was way more than I expected it to be. Knowing the legend and lore of the area, I just didn't think I'd be that lucky. I was just because that's how I approach all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna go hunt Dogman, but we ain't gonna find it. If it was that easy, everybody'd do it. And so I don't have any delusions about it. But when I went out there, I couldn't believe all the activity we have. In fact, I'll tell you this, and then we can go to wherever you want. There's actually a UFO of some kind in the trailer for the film, and most people don't know it's there. And depending on what screen you're watching it on will depend if you can even see it. And the way I know this is when we were kind of shooting clips back and forth in the early stages of figuring out what we were going to put in the film, my video guy Ward sent over the clip that I'm talking about that's actually in the trailer, and he sends it over, and he has an Android. I have an iPhone. Well, when I look at this thing, I see this light behind me, like I'm doing like a vlog in the moment when the lights are going off in the sky and everything's going crazy. I have a night vision camera turned towards me, and I'm holding it, and I'm talking about what's happening, and I'm trying to get people's perspectives as to what's happening. And as I have it facing me, actually, I wasn't even in the frame yet, but we were shooting like these bushes. I'm shooting like these bushes, and a light shoots from the ground to the sky, like a ball of light shoots straight up into the sky. And I was like, holy crap, you see that in the clip? And Ward's like, no, I don't see it. And I'm like, oh, it's right here. And I even took a screenshot, circled, and sent it over to him, and he's like, well, I don't see that in the video. And so I don't know what the difference is between the two different screens, his Android and my iPhone, but I learned right there that not everybody's going to be able to see what I see on my iPhone. And to this day, when I watch it, I see it, and other people see it too, but I think it depends on what screen you're watching it on. And that's really interesting, I think. I think it's really interesting that depending on what the screen is as to what you see, I mean, that kind of, you could really tease that out into some really philosophical conversations as to some of the evidences that people capture on film and how do these beings, entities, or whatever they are affect cameras. And it's just, I find it very interesting.
Yeah, you guys really, I'm glad that I didn't want to front load, your expectations when you arrived to the property. And I was sort of worried and on the fence because I don't want to be that showman or that guy that's like, the circus leader getting people's expectations up and saying, like, be ready for this here and that there, and here there's portal activity and there's magnetic. And anyway, there's a real darkness and a real malevolence involved too. So I was a bit worried about that as well. And I have to say that the spiritual aspect from a protection standpoint is so important. And I felt pretty assured in that realm. So that kind of, I felt a lot better about everything from that perspective. I kind of assumed that the intelligence or the high strangeness or this entity that is known to roam the landscape, or entities, would manifest itself in some way and show itself in some way to you guys. And I'm glad that it did the way it did. And, after the podcast, I've got to tell you something that kind of top secret on the down low. So stay on the line after the podcast. There's something I got to tell you that you'll find interesting.
Are we done yet?
Yeah, pretty close. From your experience, and if you guys do end up going back, there's been some changes, and I would love to meet with you guys out now that you've already kind of met the landscape, met the land on your own terms. I would feel good about meeting up with you guys, and there's been some changes to the property that would make it a little more safe and things of that nature. But I wanted to really quickly touch on encounters that people around the area, like neighbors, had. And if I wanted to ask if that's what, helped you come up with the name, because I think the name is so cool, The Shape of Shadows.
Yeah, so the name actually came from Christian, I believe, if I remember correctly. We were trying to figure out what to name it. It's tricky to name a film because you want it to be something that is catchy, good to the ear, and also says something about what the film is, And so it was hard. It was hard to figure out what we were going to name it. And I believe Christian came up with The Shape of Shadows, and I definitely don't take credit for that. But it really, the title really does describe the essence of what we're talking about, It doesn't say skinwalker. It doesn't say shapeshifter, because that's where I was going. I was like, all right, what about this variation of shapeshifter? Just because I was like, boom, this is what it's about, But we came up with this, The Shape of Shadows, which is just kind of like, it's beautiful. And it really kind of gives you this idea that you're under a blanket of mystery, and in that darkness, you see the shapes that lie in the dark, and it's just The Shape of Shadows. I absolutely love it. But yeah, and the neighbors I never got to meet, because that part of the film they shot while we were driving out there. So Joseph and Christian, they were going around doing some groundwork, trying to find out, who's willing to talk and who's not. And those people were home, and I guess it seemed like that this was going to be our opportunity to talk to them. It wasn't like maybe they had to work the next day or something. And so they just set up what they had, which was basically a Sony A7, no mics. I think Christian might have recorded with his iPhone, the audio. So it wasn't like we didn't have the good microphones or anything like that, but they're sitting in their home talking about what they have seen. And the lady said that she saw like a wolf creature of some kind walking right through your property not long before we got there. Like, she's like, no, this happened like just a few weeks ago, like, and it seemed like they were used to it, and it didn't seem like, I don't know, it just didn't seem like it was from what I saw in the video, it just didn't seem like it was a big deal to them. And I don't think she was Native, but it looked like maybe he had Native in him or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know them. I don't know if you know them, but I was really glad that we were able to talk to them, or they were able to talk to them, because I think they're the only ones that we were able to actually agree to appear on film that was in that area. And that says something in itself, I'd imagine, that people typically don't want to even bring attention to this as far as where they live. But these people did, and I was really grateful, because it just gave that outside perspective of, we're not on the property, but we still have things happen. Like, they had things popping up in their home, and it seems like it's just very haunted land everywhere you go out there. I mean, even you were talking about the caretaker's house and how the previous caretaker shot at something in the house. Well, we saw the bullet hole. Like, it's there. It really happened. There's a bullet hole on the side of the house because somebody shot through the wall at something that popped up inside the house. And even I don't know if you've had a change caretaker since we've been there, but
yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I think his name was Chester or something like that.
Yeah.
He talked about having something, I guess like a little girl entity or something, rise up out of the floor in the house one night, and that didn't make the film. In our first cut of the film, it was in there, but we pulled it out just because when you're making a film, you're trying to make a cohesive story, and just because you have something doesn't mean it's meant for the film. And but I can talk about it now, and he talked about that, and so I think the whole area has really a darker history, and I don't know if it's because of the drilling that's going on in that area, all the oil drilling and disturbing the ground. I know a lot of natives believe so, but again, this stuff was happening before the drilling happened. So I think Johnny's the one who said that it seemed to kick up though and get more prevalent when they started drilling. And because I think he wanted to start doing blessings on lands before they started drilling. It's like, all right, if I can't talk you out of drilling, can we at least do blessings on the land before you start drilling? Like, please, like, we got to do something here proactively. And so I don't know if whatever happened to that, but yeah, it's a very rich historical place, and there's plenty of mysteries out there to unfold still. It's really amazing. I think one of these days we'll definitely have to get back out there and take another crack at it.
Yeah, man, it is a hard nut to crack, but I think you guys you knocked it out of the park. You did a great job. And as the Bureau of Indian Affairs officers I've spoken with tell me, it's not a matter of if you will see something, it's a matter of when. And I'm glad you guys were able to document that. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Tony. And I hope we get to chat about this stuff soon.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Banger of an episode, and what a great guy. The legendary Tony Merkel, up to a whole lot, doing a whole lot over there at Merkel Media, and one of the best guys in the podcast game. So definitely check out The Confessionals, check out Merkel Media, check out The Shape of Shadows, and if you like this content and want more of it, head on over to heroparanormal.com. And for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can access all the content behind the paywall. There's a ton of it. You can also access that at Patreon. Just search for Hero Paranormal. Until next time, keep your eyes to the skies, feet on the ground, but don't forget to take a look around.
off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off, blast off. Come blast off in my time machine. Third eye feeling like an Visine. Blast off, blast off, blast off.